Don't be feeling blue, no, no. Shine your light all around, like I know you can do, baby. Yeah, I know you can do. Now some people call me. Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. Today, Richard Willett and Neil Sanders join me to talk about Richard's new documentary, Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis. It is an extraordinary film that brings to light the many ways in which the public is mind-controlled and hypnotized on a daily basis. Links to Richard's website and the trailer for the documentary can be found in the description box below. The film is expected to be released next month in September 2019. The discussion with Richard and Neil was wide-ranging as we cover a lot of ground. And so without further ado, here's the interview. Well, folks, we have a great show this afternoon. My guests are Neil Sanders and Richard Willett. And Richard is, his company is Brick in the Wall Media, and you can hit that site at brickinthewallmedia.com. And a new documentary is coming out. It's called Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis, and it's going to be released next month in September of 2019. Many of my listeners know that, I talk a lot about how mass hypnosis plays into the agenda, how the agenda is moved forward. And many times, actually almost all the time, most people have no idea that, as Neil would say, their thoughts are not their own. And so we're going to dig into this today, and we're going to spend about 2 hours discussing the film. Richard, I want to welcome you first. Neil's been on before, and maybe because you're a first-time guest, what we can do is have you just fill us in on your background and your journey a little bit and how you got to be where you are today doing this work and especially these documentaries.
Sure, yeah. I've got an honours degree in film and TV. I've always worked in media production. I say always since I was about 15, 16, but I've always made films as a kid. So a documentary became a love of mine, really, because I prefer people's stories and people. And then I kind of got into the conspiracy theory type world when I was about early 20s, mid 20s. I'm 38 now, so it's going back a bit. And following the work of people such as obviously the early ones like David Icke and his work, and sort of slowly waking up as they did to how this world actually functions, really. And obviously the filmmaking was coming alongside it. So I was doing a lot of comedy stuff around this sort of work, like unsolved mystery, like comedy versions of that. And I always interested in the paranormal, fringe sort of science, anything that was out of the ordinary, because this world never really made any sense to me. So the way it functions. So I started to look into that, really, and obviously it's blended with the film work. It's really, really hard, as you guys know, to make a living out of doing this sort of work. So I wanted to go work in TV. I realised TV was not a place for me. The type of person you had to become to work in TV after I got my degree was not the type of person I wanted to be. You became a button pusher. I would work at the BBC for a little while, and you'd go up there and it would be like going behind the scenes in The Wizard of Oz and seeing that everyone there was literally behind the curtain pressing buttons. There was no creativity in it at all, not even the slightest bit of creativity, and not the slightest bit of original thinking. And then there was like a group think mentality to it, which was almost like cult-like. So they all thought the same and had the same views, and they started to believe them. And I found it all very, very bizarre. So I wanted to make films that weren't like that, but it was very hard to make a living doing that. So we set this company up just over a year ago, and I was working in the self-development field before that, and there was a lot of strange people and cult-like behaviour in that as well, and it just kept popping up everywhere I tried to do have a job. This weird behaviour just kept popping up, and I was like, these people are strange, and either I'm very messed up or there's something going on here and I don't like it. So me and Neil started talking. I think it was probably about a year and a half ago. I read Neil's books, reached out to him, and we've done some podcasts together. And his books are incredible. And the way he's able to look into these things in the detail, is like able to remember like a machine. And I was saying to my partner last night, I can write, but I can't get the details the way Neil was. So when we were making this film, I wanted to have someone who could actually just know. You could go into look at his work and know he knew exactly what he was talking about. Because as the filmmaker, I'm not necessarily an expert. I'm the person who's good at putting the story together, putting the people in the right places, but I don't necessarily know everything that I need to know. And I don't think that's the job of the filmmaker. I think the job of the filmmaker is to find the people that know. And Neil was the first person I came to after Jonathan being the presenter. I wanted an expert that could really put some meat on the flesh for this particular film. So that's kind of a very quick overview of how I got to this place. I'm working with Gareth Icke, which is David Icke's son, a lot lately. I've been doing my own podcast, Glitching the Code podcast, which talks to very similar people like yourself, like Neil, and looks into all of these similar things as you do, really. So it's an interest of mine, and I'm starting to make a living doing films on smaller budgets. And this is the first one about Mind Control.
Okay, now I think it's going to be a fascinating film. And how did you connect up with Neil? How did you guys meet?
I reached out to you, Neil, didn't I? I think it was about a year and a half ago, just to do a podcast, really.
Yeah, we did a podcast, not similar to this, really, just sort of talking about the similar themes and mind control and manipulation of the public, perception management, and that type of thing. And yeah, we just clicked and hit it off. And so Rich has done a previous film as well that some people might have seen called Plugged In, which is really, really good. It looks at social media and the sort of the harmful effects of social media, the way that, again, it changes people's behaviour and that type of thing. So obviously, when he asked me to jump on this one, I was delighted. And it's a cracking film. It's a really, really good film, even though I'm in it. Because... It does several things. Like, the first thing that I wasn't aware of when I watched it was it actually tells the story of Jonathan, who's the presenter, and he does it in a really, really effective way. Because I was not actually aware that Jonathan himself has had various sort of he's worked in the industry. He's seen the other side. He's seen the trickery. Aside from the fact that he's an incredibly talented stage hypnotist and hypnotherapist as well, but he's seen all those things, and he's been subject to some pretty nefarious trickery, ironic, seeing as he's an illusionist as well. So that was fascinating. And I said that some of the documentary is really, really poignant and really quite touching, to be quite honest. But it also, I think it's going to be one of these things where basically if you're sort of new to the subject, it's going to sort of introduce you to a lot of things. If you're a bit of an experienced swimmer, it's going to, hopefully throw up some things that you haven't thought about or looked at in a slightly different angle. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it being released.
Can we give a little background on Jonathan so our audience is more familiar with who he is?
Well, I met Jonathan through a chap in the UK, probably not know them in the US, but in the UK they were quite a big boy band in the mid-90s called E17, which were just as big as Take That, if you've heard of Take That. They were a huge boy band, and the guy was the lead singer of that. And I met him 3 years ago to do a documentary with him. He was involved with a situation with Rupert Murdoch, the Rupert Murdoch's news group, where his phone was apparently hacked. But there was all sorts of other things going on as well in the background to do with the craze, to do with the underworld here in the UK. So it kind of it was a very, very odd situation. The film never got released, unfortunately, and it's still sitting on the shelf. But through that, I got to know Jonathan, because Jonathan also was in a high-profile case against News of the World after they hacked a singer called Toulousa. They tried to set her up, sorry, not hacked her. They tried to set her up with, I think it was a cocaine bust, and it all went wrong, which is what brought News of the World down. They shut it down after that because you realise there was a guy called the Fake Sheikh here in the UK who used to dress up as a sheikh and try and get people in compromising positions and set them up, which is what happened to Jonathan. He was trying to set the Fake Sheikh up and it backfired. So that's how I got to know Jonathan. Through that, we just got chatting. And so the background of Jonathan was he was brought up on the circus. He was a clown. He was 6 years old. He was in the national paper as a clown. He was, he grew up in the circus, so he had some hard times at schools, moved into a lot of schools. He was bullied at school for being in a family that was seen on the fringe. So he's always lived on the fringe of society, I suppose, for want of a better word. And He went on to be a magician, TV magician. He had some controversy there where he done some things in his youth he probably isn't as proud of right now that he talks about in the film, just to get publicity, really. And then that all backfired in, I think, the early 2000s when he ended up spending a stint in prison because of one of these backfired stunts. And basically, since then, it's been hard for him to kind of get any traction. The TV industry in the UK is a very small industry. It's a very it's not a very nice place to work. So yeah, since then, and then, I mean, there's other things going on as well, but that's a brief history of Jonathan.
Okay, all right, excellent. So with the film, Richard or Neil, how do you kick it off? How do you get the audience introduced to the fact that there's a lot of hypnosis going on, and people are subjected to it every day in every way, and for the most part, they are completely unaware. So how do you get it introduced so that you get their attention and you grab them?
Well, I mean, it's very well edited. It uses a lot of sort of, it's a really high spec sort of, for want of a better phrase, documentary. So like the production techniques are really, really great on there. It basically breaks it down. It breaks it down into chapters, and it sort of, it puts it alongside Jonathan's story, so it's introducing different things at different times. It's a huge amount to take in, so it really goes looking at things like the music industry and the movies and advertising and various other things, the courts. What's the opening bit? I forget what it actually starts.
I think the very, very first part is, I think it's Secret Societies. I'm sure, yeah, it is. It starts off with Secret Society.
A lot of it's
the Magic Circle and Freemasons.
Yeah, I mean, the running theme is kind of the very famous Walter Lippmann quotes and Edward Benet's quote. You know, the conscious manipulation of the human mind. And the idea that essentially your ideas are being formed and that things are being manipulated behind the scenes by men that essentially you don't know, and really they don't have your best interests at heart. They're just trying to order society. The Walter Lippmann quote is very sort of telling about this. Is the idea that basically, if you can paint pictures in people's minds, if you can manufacture consent or construct consent, then you've got people, because people react from sort of learned behavior. You know, you can only either have sort of personal experience or basically somebody who's teaching you. And so, you know, society is set up in a way where it's supposedly benevolent, top-down meritocracy. The people at the top are there because they're supposed to be there, the best at the job, they've got there through hard work, etc. And they're benevolently telling you all this information. Well, it transpires that this isn't true, that actually they're manipulating you so that they control how you act and how you react. And the best way of explaining this is that basically if somebody finds a lump of yellow metal that looks, for all intensive purposes, like it's gold, you will act like you've found gold, because you can only work off the information that you've been taught and been given to you. So when this is exactly what the point of the upper stratas of society is. They don't feel that people are worthy or capable of being involved in the facilitating or running of society. They're supposed to be observers at best and passive observers, but you've got to give the idea that people are involved and that people have got choices and that people have got some sort of say in how things how things work, and basically a connection to society in order to keep society going. You know, it basically works against people's well-being, but that's the way that things work. And how do you paint these pictures in people's heads? Well, you do it through the news media, you do it through the schooling system, you do it through aspirational connections to celebrities, you do it through things that seem very, very trite, like the music industry and television and films, because these have all got messages. And, you know, this isn't sort of, messages. You're sounding like Charlie Manson. I'm not saying I've seen Jesus in my cornflakes or anything like that. There are specific advertising and marketing techniques that are used. One example is, and I'm sure we've talked about this before, Mike, is the military and their sort of hold on the entertainment industry. Then most people won't realise this, because the people that are actually going to watch these films, like Iron Man, Transformers, the teenagers. They're impressionable teenagers, and basically they just like the explosions, and they like the big guns and the helicopters and the tanks. And what people don't realise is that that's a very, very subtle, or not so subtle sometimes, advertising campaign for the army. It basically works by saying, look at this, look how cool it is. Oh, okay, how do we know that to be true? Because the CIA has a liaison office in Hollywood. And it's a quid pro quo thing. You can use their equipment, or you can have access to helicopters, aircraft carriers, anything, so long as it presents the military in a really favourable light. So you get a great film out of it, the public's entertained, and the military gets portrayed in a really positive light. That's brilliant advertising for two reasons. One, because it's very, very cost effective, and two, because the best advertising works when people aren't really paying attention. Like that's why advertising on television is so avant-garde at times, because you're watching television, you're relaxed, you're in a repetitive, repeated thing that you've done loads and loads of times. There's perhaps some noise burbling away in the background, and before you know it, you stop thinking and boom, you're in what would be denoted as a hypnotic state. And there, what's the point of getting somebody into hypnosis, as Mike well knows? It's so that we can bypass the conscious mind. It's so that we can get straight to the subconscious mind and get to the workings, the things, the actions that happen without you actually making those decisions. And that's why so many adverts are just ludicrous positive representations, like Nike, explosion, look at this beautiful girl. Because all your brain does is go, oh, they're all good things, aren't they? They're things I like. I'll associate them together. And boom, you've got it. You've painted the pictures in people's heads by accessing them through a very nefarious and secretive manner, and basically playing on instinctual drives that 9 out of 10 people don't know that they've got. And if they do know that they've got, really can't be bothered to think about after a long, hard day at work.
Can I add to that? Well, with Jonathan's, I'm sorry, with what Neil just said there, didn't that really hit home with me, being someone who wanted to work in narrative film? The heartbreak of realizing when you go into them industries that you are only doing what they tell you to do, and you're serving a purpose for them, and then having to shut down part of your own morals and values to do that job. I mean, having that kind of almost like rose-tinted glasses when you're younger, thinking you're going to work in the film industry. That's why I'm passionate about these films, because to do that is manipulating someone, and to that is abusing people's trust. And that's what I see on a day-to-day basis. So all the films that we make and every podcast we do is about how your trust has been abused. And that's what I'm really, really angry about. That's what I'm really passionate about, is that you are being abused on a daily basis. And not only that, you're being abused to the point where you're abusing each other. And these people don't give a damn whether you abuse each other or not. They just want what they want, and they'll allow you to abuse each other. And that was a classic example there, and what Neil just said. And Neil pointed out a really good bit in the film when he said to me, because I didn't think I used to be able to. I honestly thought I couldn't be hypnotized, and I didn't really understand what hypnosis was. And then Neil said something in the film, was like, "Have you ever cried at a film?" And I was like, "Yes, I've cried at a film." And then I didn't get that, because and now I realise I can be hypnotised, because I can cry at something I know not to be true. And that simple thing in the film is really powerful, and that's hit home with me. And it's the fact that there's so many levels of mind control. There's your trauma-based mind control where you split the brain, but then there's these tiny little bits of mind control. There's these tiny bits of manipulation. And I find that really, really disgusting, the powers that be, if that's a word, and I don't know the word to say it, are manipulating you like an abusive parent is. And not only that, they're manipulating you to choose between two abusive parents when they're both abusive, as in politics, as in a democratic decision that doesn't exist. And Neil's work is why I wanted him in this film, because he gives classic examples of how people are being abused their trust is being abused on a daily basis from all different angles, and that's what the film's about. It's about being bombarded from every different angle.
The controllers, I call them the controllers. This is why their mind control techniques are in play 24/7, 365 days a year, because they have to constantly bombard the human mind with their propaganda, with their conditioning, with their hypnosis. It's a tough nut to crack because most people, 99.9% of the population, they do not believe or give one thought to the fact that they are being led or that they're being conditioned. They actually believe that they're free. They actually believe that they're making their own decisions. They're their own person, and they have really no concept of all this. And that's why, like I said, this is a very difficult concept to get across to the general public. The three of us understand this completely, but to the average person, it becomes something that it's just very elusive. They pay no attention to it because their reality is their reality. That's what they're accustomed to. That's what they're conditioned to, right? So when we turn around and say, your thoughts are not your own, and you try to explain it, a lot of people just step back from it. Oh, no. Nobody controls me. Nobody tells me what to do.
Well, I mean, that's kind of true to an extent, because just to sort of take that point of if you've ever cried at a film, you're believing something, you're giving yourself over to the emotion of something that you know not to be real. So it shows that you have the capacity to be distracted. And the other point is, which very much ties into what you've just said, Mike, is that when you're a hypnotist or a hypnotherapist, as you know, you don't actually hypnotize people. If we're being brutally honest, nobody really knows what hypnosis is. It's a very very beautiful and wonderful feeling of relaxation, but there's debates and arguments even with the scientific community as to whether it's a somnambulant state, whether it's a conscious state, even or even if there's what element of placebo effect or self-healing is involved in it.
Well, they even argue over the levels of trance, right? So
exactly, precisely. But the point being that one thing that will unite any sort of the hypnotherapist is worth their salt is that we don't hypnotize you. We provide the circumstances for you to allow yourself to fall into a state of hypnosis. And that is what is happening in, say, films or in the construction of society. This is entirely the point. That these mechanisms that are there to either distract or to overwhelm you or to make you to basically panic you into a sense of fight or flight. And this ties back to the actual. This isn't a theory. They've admitted this. Like it was a chap called Eric Trist. In the 60s, he was talking about the work of the Tavistock Institute, and then what they wanted to do was introduce something called social turbulence, which is really just trauma or constant worry. And trauma doesn't necessarily mean like a bereavement or a threat of impending doom. It can be something as straightforward as loneliness or not having enough money, and all these concepts of aspiration and attractiveness and the really sort of disposable nature of society, and the fact that people feel that they're falling between the cracks and such like that. All of these things are elements that they're traumatizing you, and I can't help but think that a lot of this is by design. Why is this by design? Well, because according to people like Eric Trist, social turbulence allows people to be more malleable. Put very, very simply, if you're worrying about 4 or 5 different things, you haven't really got the time or the inclination or, frankly, the capacity to cope with larger mechanisms or anything else that's going on. So if you're constantly bombarded like this was originally the idea of a guy called Kurt Lewin, and what he wanted to do was to say, it's called future shock. It's about too much change happening too fast. And what this does is to say it reduces you to what's called a tabula rasa, which is essentially a blank slate. You can't cope, and so you fall to pieces, and you either sort of lash out violently, you act out, or you look to an authority figure. And again, that in itself is a hypnotic concept, which we said earlier. It's like you would assume that people are in charge because they know what they're doing. often that's the case, but more often than not, I'll give you a really good example, right? Okay. You phone somebody at a call center or whatever and want to know, and you're not happy with how it's run. And you always say, I want to speak to your manager or your team leader or something like that. Now, why? Well, because you assume because they're actually higher up in the starter, they know what they're talking about. Anybody that's worked in a call center knows that that person doesn't know what they're talking about. They're there to corral the troops. The experts are the people you're talking to on the actual phone. But because of that blah, 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 these are things that have been programmed into you. I'm feeling haughty, so I demand respect, and you're not worthy of my respect. Nonsense. These are all constructs. These are all ways that essentially consent is manufactured or constructed around you, saying this is up, this is down, this is left, this is right. And again, once we've painted that picture, once we've got that sort of landscape there, and we can tell you, oh, you need to be worried about this. Oh, you need to be worried about this. Oh, you need to be worried about this. And have you seen this? Oh, this would be nice, but you haven't quite got enough money for that. And that's a shame, because that would make your life so much more palatable, wouldn't it? And then you'd probably solve all your problems. These are the constant drip, 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 drip messages that are going in. And that is entirely the point, to overwhelm people, to make people feel like they just can't cope. And this is, again, you know, it's tied into why so many people choose to, you know, purposely avoid reality in whatever way. You know, we've got the record levels of sort of opioid epidemics and drug use and loneliness and isolation and misery and fear of missing out and smiling depression and depression within teens and all of this sort of stuff. And again, this is the point. It's because they're giving you fundamentally contradictory messages, and your brain can tell that it's wrong, but it can't quite figure out why or where this is coming from.
Yeah, they're constantly attacking in this trauma model, Neil and Richard, an individual's self-worth, self-esteem, self-confidence. It's constantly under attack, so that you're always questioning where you are. Where are you in the pecking order? Where are you on the ladder? You're always worried about that stuff or focused on it. And this is what derails people. And I agree, Neil, this is why today we have, here in the United States, incredible levels of people suffering from depression. Why are so many people depressed?
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of it ties into social media, really. I mean, that's an addiction as well, presenting yourself on social media. And I mean that in a real literal sense, because what it does is you get a positive reaction online, which just 10 years ago, right, okay, it was considered incredibly weird, right, to put out the amount of information that we put out on social media, or to interact with complete strangers in the way that we interact with social media. Why do we do that? Because it's the norm. Somebody's said this is how you act, or this is how it's organically happened. And that's the point. So you put out something positive on social media, and basically you get a dopamine or a serotonin response. Like, it's a chemical response in your brain. You feel rewarded. You feel like you've achieved something. And that's essentially what people want. And that's what they're doing. They're feeding you these little snippets and sort of little rewards. It's basically very much like a rat in a maze. That they're training you to get these pleasure responses. And the problem is basically, and this is again observable in rats in mazes actually, when people are deprived of pleasure and then they get something that makes it very, very pleasurable, like for example in drug tests in rats and stuff like that, they'll forgo food to get to drink cocaine laced water. They'll go without food and starve themselves to death happily, because you know what, life's bloody hard. And so any type of sort of like pleasure or any sort of like joy or any sort of sense of achievement or accomplishment is really, really, well, it's rewarding, not only in a sort of social sense, but in a physiological sense. And if people can manipulate that, they can force you into these directions and get you basically running around and around, tapping on this lever in order to get that response. Now, how does it work like the rats in the maze? Well, I'll tell you how it works, because just like the rats in the maze, you start to do stupid things. You start to do things that are actually toxic to your personal health. You might even start to alter your behavior and start acting more like your online persona. Again, this is very subtle end training. It's using data essentially to drive behavior change, which is I mean, it's bizarre aside from anything else, but that's how these things work, and that's why a lot of people, you're quite right, don't actually think that these things are going on, because it creeps in, it creeps in, it creeps in, it creeps in, and like, you know, people are taking photos of their dinner and putting it on the internet. Why? Like, but apparently it's the thing to do, isn't it? So this is, you know, that's learned behavior though. That's been subtly fed to you. Look how cool this is. Look how cool this is. Look how cool this is. And all of a sudden, basically now, you've got GPS satellite that's got your entire internet history linked up to your back pocket with all your passwords on and everything. Like, everything about you is on your phone, your entire music collection, what you like to do, who you're interacting with. It makes it very, very, I mean, this is slightly a tangent, but basically this makes it very, very easy to, figure out what makes you tick. And once you've figured out what makes you tick, we can manipulate you.
Yeah, the behavior is very bizarre. So you were talking about the phones, Neil. So I'll just throw this out there. You go to a restaurant, there's a family of four. And when Barry and I go to dinner, we'll take a look at the tables around us, and everybody is staring at their phone. They're not talking to each other. So the family of four is not connecting as a family.
Yeah, well, that's the weird thing about social media. It makes you less sociable. Like, it's Orwellian, isn't it? Really, like, I mean, that's the bizarre thing about, let's just say, phones, right? What are phones? They're supposed to be they're supposed to make your life simpler and easier. What are laptops? Laptops are supposed to make your life easier. What does it actually do? Well, it means that you can work on the train on the way to work as well. So all these time-saving devices, what they've done is they've created another layer of behaviour that didn't exist before. It was just supposed to, you know, as I say, these are supposed to make your life less stressful. But why do we think that basically having somebody basically tapping you on the shoulder going, talk to me right now, talk to me right now, talk to me right now, would be less stressful, which is really what a phone is. And then, as you say, like, people's entire life, their entire sort of expression of who they are is through this tiny little device that's in their hand. It is a very, very strange thing that we're in at the minute. And I think a lot of that is to do with this concept of future shock.
Well, the technology is usurping our time. It's taking time that we can spend doing something of value, like spending time with your family, getting some alone time, whatever it may be, time being creative. And it's taking it away. So I'll give you a quick story. Then I want to jump to something here that you guys mentioned earlier about secret societies. But I used to work in the corporate world. I was in the corporate world for over 30 years. And if I took vacation, you were talking about the laptop, Neil, the first thing your boss would ask you is, so you're taking your laptop with you, right? Because we have a conference call on this day. I'm supposed to be at the beach. So if maybe you could take a break during your day and be on this conference call, that would be great. And so what happens is, you know, people, they don't want to do that, right? What they're saying inside their head is, I don't want to do that. I'm on vacation. Leave me alone. But, Neil, it's what you were saying before, right? There's this trauma piece of it. And the trauma piece of this is, what's implied is, well, if I don't do this, I'm not going to be in good standing. If the company is going through downsizing, I may be on the list of people that are going to be shown the door. So you have to alter your true self, what you truly want to be doing at that time, which is to relax and be on the beach with your family, to stop doing that and then go take this phone call and be on that phone call for an hour and a half, right? So this is the conditioning that takes place, and most people have accepted it as the norm now. I can tell you this because I spent all that time in the business world. They may not like it, but they'll say, it's just the way it is.
Oh, no, absolutely. A friend of mine delayed going to a festival this week because she couldn't get out of a conference call. And Yeah, and the important distinction is that what we're doing, we're not talking about the sort of normal things that come with responsibilities of being an adult. Like, you know, if you don't turn up at your job, you don't get paid. Like, that's extra, and that's the creep, and that's exactly how these things get introduced, basically. Like, very, very sort of slowly, until all of a sudden it's normality. I mean, obviously that's sort of how things work anyway, but yeah, particularly when it's a sort of top-down and a corporate methodology of that, it can become very, very dangerous and very, very insidious, very, very quickly. You know, a lot of it is, it's the other thing, what it's about subtly shifting attitudes as well. It's not just sort of behaviors, it's people's attitudes. And, you know, I mean, the painting pictures thing is a good one. The concept of like a terrorist or whatever. Like, you know, most people would think of a gentleman with a beard and turban and stuff like that. That's not because they've actually had that interaction with the majority of people. It's because that's the portrayal of it. And if you look at statistics, particularly now in America, that is not actually representative of the threat that is sort of most worrying at present. But that's another point, isn't it? It's about control of information, control of Trump's a master of this. Like, this is a hypnotic thing. This fake news nonsense, right? Okay, of course the media is inaccurate, right? Okay, but what you're doing there is you if that had happened in North Korea, right, everyone would quite rightly point out and go, okay, I see what you're doing there. What you're going to do is, does any negative press is now, you know, fake news. It's Soviet, actually, is that type of methodology. You're narrowing the pool of information to government sanctioned, and that's never good. I don't care about the cult of personality. I don't buy into, oh, there's one good guy. Anything that basically channels it down to government sanctioned approval of what is correct and what is not correct, with no avenue for dissent, that is dangerous. But it's sold, particularly in the sense of Trump, as, oh, he's a bit of a good old boy, isn't he? He's a bit of a, like, you know, he's going to shake things up. He's going to drain the swamp. Is he? Heck, like, come on. I mean, has he started yet? Like, you know, he's had long enough. Let me know when he's going to start.
I think the swamp has gotten worse, actually.
You reckon? Like, absolutely. Well, we'll say we're going to do the show like later in the month on the Heritage Foundation and the CNP and stuff like that.
Yes, yes.
The CIA-backed think tanks that Trump essentially had to audition in front of before they allowed him to be the candidate.
Yeah.
This is a fact. It's actually, you can check all this out. Like, but we'll say I digress. We should talk about that at a later date.
But let me ask this, because I talk a lot about secret societies. It sounds like you're going to address it in the film. This is something that is a huge hurdle to get over with a lot of people, because a lot of people are just completely oblivious to secret societies. If you mention Freemasonry, the first thing they say is, well, you know, my uncle or, you know, my dad's a Freemason and he goes to the local lodge, right, where the first 3 degrees hang out and drink beer and do, you know, they do good stuff, community things. And that's as far as they go. That's as far as they want to know. And anything beyond that is something that you're fabricating. You're a lunatic, a tinfoil hat wearer. And so they walk away from the conversation. So how do you address that in the film? How do you get people to at least listen to that piece of information about mind control and hypnosis?
Well, what we do in the film really is we point out that these things are compartmentalized. So just because the quickest way for me to explain it is just because if you go into a job like Neil was saying and you're working on the phones, you will not know what's going on in the office upstairs. And then people in the office upstairs will definitely not what's going on the board of trustees. And the board of trustees wouldn't know what's going on at the bank that owes them the money. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that just because you work somewhere, you know everything. And I've worked as a youth worker, and I know, because I'm quite clued up on these things, I know that some of the funding that's come through was not spent on the young kids. There's no way it was, because I've been trying to paint a wall with a pot of paint for £6 when there's £250,000 come through that building. So I know for a fact that some of that money's gone somewhere it shouldn't have gone. Now, these things happen on global scale. So things are compartmentalized. So we point that out in the film, is that just because you work somewhere, you know, someone's worked somewhere, doesn't mean there's a subsection of within that is doing things that are nefarious, and you will not know about that, and you will be going about your day doing your job. You're not doing anything wrong, but you won't know your purpose. You'll only know what you're supposed to be doing, and especially if you know nothing about how the world supposedly runs. And we only know so much. Of course we do. We're only doing podcasts, and we can't. I mean, it's clear. I mean, we all heard about I've heard about these 16 families, and we do talk about that in the documentary, in the Who's It They, which I think is a really important question to answer in the film. And we brush on that at the very end. You say, who is this they? And there'll be people behind these Rockefellers and these Rothschilds that probably never heard of. Clearly, there's always going to be levels above, and there's always going to be things going on. So we talk about the secret societies have levels and compartmentalizations of secrets. Now, you can't mind read. I can't mind read you. And I think, obviously, like as Neil talks about Cambridge Analytica and CSL, is an attempt to mind read. It's an attempt to guess what you're going to do before you do it. But you can't read someone else's mind. It's as simple as that. And even if you could, I'll give you the power of suggestion to say, well, I will say you think you can, but you've only been told you can. And then the element of doubt's in there. And then we're all screwed because it doesn't work. The element of doubt and mind reading don't go together as one. So the fact is that because we can't read each other's minds, you will never know the 100% truth of anyone that you work with, even the person you love and sleep by next night. They have their own thoughts. They are allowed to their own thoughts. So in that sense, secret societies are the same thing. They're compartmentalized. You will only know as much as you're allowed to know and how useful you are to that. So we talk about that in terms of the Freemasons. I know some Freemasons. And we talk about, I mean, you've obviously got the Rosicrucians, you've got all sorts. I mean, religions, Freemasons, even coming down to the Magic Circle is a secret society at different levels. You're only allowed in, and you're only allowed in if you behave in certain ways or look the other way, which is Hollywood. For instance, you either behave in this weird way or you turn a cheek and you put this stuff in your film. And you only got to look at how many times you see the checkerboard floor in every bloody film you could possibly imagine. And it pops up everywhere. And once you start seeing that checkerboard floor in Hollywood films, you'll see it in pretty much every big Hollywood film. But that's just a nod to say we've got some money in this film. But what that means is that the higher you want to go in any industry, and that's probably the main thing that frustrates me, is you're going to have to meet some dodgy people. You're going to have to do some dodgy things or turn the other cheek or facilitate some dodgy things. And if you're not going to go high, no matter how skilled and talented you are.
Yeah, that's entirely the thing. I mean, I think the reason that you get this sort of pushback is because basically some people assume that, if you're a Freemason, that must mean that you're sacrificing kids. And of course it's not. There's nuance to these things, as always. What they function as, secret societies, think tanks, NGOs, these types of things, which are all basically similar things. They work to do two things: to influence and perhaps instigate policy. And also as a proving ground. It's basically a way to see if you're sound, to see if you can basically hang with us. An extreme example would be where you have to masturbate in the coffin at the Skull and Bones and recount your sexual history. So essentially you've done an embarrassing thing that your peers can hold over you and potentially have some sort of blackmail. But it's more than that. It's really just it's a rite of passage, isn't it? It's to show that basically you're one of the gang now. Then you go and steal a skull, or if you're in the Bullingdon Club, you go and smash a restaurant up and don't tell on your mates and that sort of thing. So that's how it works. It doesn't necessarily mean that any of these institutions are actually fundamentally corrupt, or even that they're fundamentally evil. That's a completely different argument if anybody wants to put forward that. But what it means is that basically, like anything, you can utilize these things to facilitate driving people in a direction that you want to do. And from a sort of hypnotic sense, was you rising up an organization. Basically, you could be told a number of things. Hey, you deserve this. Hey, most people couldn't make harsh decisions like that. Hey, playing with the big boys now, unfortunately, this might well, pump a lot of mercury into a village in China. But on the other hand, think of those bonuses, and do you see how it slowly, trickles through, and essentially that's a form of hypnosis.
I wanted to go back to something that Richard had said, where people work because they work someplace, they think they know everything that goes on, right? And I've gotten that too. Well, I work there, Mike, and that doesn't happen. I said, well, when you work there, were you aware when they were planning to get rid of your department?
Yeah.
Right? So that means that it is compartmentalized. That means that there is a need to know. And that's exactly how the secret societies work. There's a need to know. And you only know as much as you're allowed to know at a certain degree. You don't know anything above that. Right? And then when you move up, then you get some more information. And it's very interesting to me how people really oversimplify the whole process. So I'm really looking forward to the film to see how you guys address this, because that is one of the biggest pieces I think that people really fall flat on. They just don't understand secret societies. They don't understand how the world is compartmentalized with regard to knowledge. And once you do start to understand that, your eyes will open. And like you said, Richard, once you become aware of the duality of the checkerboard, you see it everywhere. It's all over Hollywood. It's all over television. It's taxi cabs. The Chicago police force has it around the band of their hat.
Well, the entirety of the police has the checkerboard in England.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's there. It's not, people don't stop to ask themselves, well, why is the checkerboard all over the place? But in any case, I wanted to ask you that question because, like I said, it's something that I find myself constantly trying to explain to the point where I get cottonmouth.
So, well, I think it basically ties back to this concept that a lot of people still don't think that they're able to be tricked or that they're able to be hypnotized. And there's a bit that it's included in the trailer, but it's not actually in the final form. But the way I thought about it is that there would be three ways that you could quite reasonably hypnotize somebody to do something that would go against their normal moral code without even having to utilize some sort of traumatic MK Ultra type thing, right? And this is an analogy because this can be sort of expanded to real world situations as well. The first thing would be to change the action, right? Okay, so if you told somebody that they were spraying somebody with a water pistol, then basically they would do it, and unbeknownst to them, they've got a real gun. So if you can make somebody do something, convince somebody that they're doing something and they don't know that the action is actually different, then that's a way you could manipulate somebody. The second way would be to alter the target. So you say that that's not a real human being, that's a cardboard cutout. Or alternatively, that person there is a murderer, or he's got a bomb and he's going to blow up the entire world. Therefore, you would be morally justified in either shooting the target or in killing that person. And you'd be quite happy to do that. That wouldn't go against your normal moral code. And the third way would be that basically you convince somebody, you give them so much trust and create such a level of rapport that they trust you regardless of what you tell them. So you say, run at that glass window, trust me. And as the subject, you go, well, I think I'm going to smash through it and then fall to my death. But I trust Neil so much, there's obviously going to be some trick. And you go screaming at the window, and unfortunately, there isn't a trick. You end up on the pavement. So that could be extrapolated to an extreme thing like blow yourself up, you get 72 virgins. The second one could be all those brown people wearing turbans, they're the enemy. They're potentially, ISIS or whatever. Therefore, you'd be morally justified in murdering a load of civilians. If you're in a drone or something, or you're the drone operator and you're essentially pushing a button, you're looking through a screen and dehumanizes that aspect of it, making it more like a computer game or something like a target. I've heard people basically say that in a combat situation, you're not shooting at people, you're shooting at two-dimensional shapes that can kill you, which is actually the natural process that you would need to do to be able to actually cope in that scenario. All of those three things hypnosis. They're extreme examples, but I'm sure that people could think of less extreme examples of things where you would do something that actually, I don't want to do that, or it's not right, or the result is completely not what you were sold in the brochure. But that is a way that to get there. There's three ways that perfectly reasonable, perfectly rational people could be tricked. I mean, everybody is susceptible to confidence tricks. And again, the cruel sort of nature of it is that the more honest you are, and the less likely you are to be a con man, the easier it is to con you, because you don't look out for it all the time. And it's horrendous, really, because essentially what they're doing is they're pulling you tight and then stabbing you in the back.
Yeah, when you don't know, you're gullible. That's the card that the controllers play. Your gullibility, the degree that you're willing to accept things without questioning, that's the ace up their sleeve. And also, Neil, you mentioned, we talked about the military, but there's this constant glorification of the military.
Yeah.
Right. Here in the United States, the military is tied very much into NFL football.
Well, yeah. I didn't realize that. So, well, I'd forgotten about it, that they reintroduced, there's two things. The concept of pro sports in America has been heavily, heavily pushed by the military-industrial complex, the Department of Defense and various other things, because it's macho, it's rugged. And the other thing that's been attached to it relatively recently, as far as I'm aware, there was a resurgence of having the anthem played, and the concept of patriotism was reintroduced to sport. And obviously this is where Kaepernick had the opportunity to make his protest, which, I was totally all for that, right? What really annoyed me about that is the same people that were protesting that are the same people who want guns. It's like, okay, fine. Why do you want guns? To fight against a tyrannical government. Right, so you want to fight against them, but you don't want people pointing out the fact that it might be encroaching. Where does that make sense? Or could it be something else about Colin Kaepernick that you don't like? What could it be about Colin Kaepernick that some people don't actually like? Who knows? It's a mystery. But yeah, that is another subtle way of basically instilling this concept of, it's not even, this is a very important point. It's not instilling a concept of patriotism. It's constructing a concept of patriotism.
That's right.
Patriotism means that it can mean a lot of different things to different people. But I like Bill Hicks' explanation that basically the rights to freedom mean that you can burn that flag. People died for that flag so that you can burn that flag, so that you can express yourself, so that you have the right to kneel down and make a peaceful protest against the murder of children by people who are paid to protect you. That's fine. And for people to suggest that doing that is in some way anti-American, which is a nonsense concept anyway. What is American? It means a dozen things. This is not to denigrate anybody's love of your country, because I'm not doing that. What I'm saying is it means a dozen things to a dozen different people. Like somebody in New York is probably not going to have the same concept of American spirit or patriotism that somebody in the Deep South has. Similarly, they won't have it in the Midwest or on the West Coast, because you have vastly different lives, different concerns, different histories, and different day-to-day happenings. You have different weather and different climate, different. America is such a wonderfully impressive and diverse country that you can't possibly boil it down to a sentence. I mean, even in California, you can go swimming in the morning and skiing in the afternoon. That's amazing. What's really, really strange about the concept of patriotism, particularly nationalism when it's tied to it, is it very rarely actually extols these things. It very rarely says, look at how beautiful the countryside is in America. Look at how great we are at education. Look at how fine we are at technology. We're the people that put somebody on the moon, allegedly, etc., etc., etc. What it tends to do is pander to a rather shallow jingoism, talking about other things coming to threaten it, rather than actually ever really selling what is great. I mean, that's an interesting, we talk about this in the film. Make America Great Again. it's aside from the fact that it's Reagan and it's very, very, there's a lot of dodginess connected to that particular phrase, but it's weasel words, right? Let's start with America, as we've just discussed. What does America actually mean? Does it mean America the corporation? Does it mean America the sports team? Does it mean America the military power? Does it mean America the great hyperpower? Does it mean America the cultural entity? Because all of those are completely different things. And even within those things, you've got massively diverse and opposing views. Okay, make. What does make mean? Right? Are you going to make it? Are we going to make it? How long is it going to take? What actions are going to have to be involved? You can make a bed, you can make a cake, you can make peace, you can make war. Make what is going to be involved with that? Again, right, that's an interesting one. When was America great? When specifically was it? Was it in the 50s when certain people couldn't vote? Was it in the 80s when Reaganomics was kicking in and everybody was losing, the wealth gap was increasing, and you were supporting genocide in South America? Was it then? When was it? That's curious there. And what does great actually mean? What does it mean? Like, as I say, does it harken back to the time when nobody could touch you on the baseball field? Does it harken back to the time when you won a war? Does it harken back to the time when you prevented a war by removing the Cuban Missile Crisis standoff? Any and all of those things could be described. But this is the point. It's the same with change we can believe in. It's nonsense. It's a meaningless slogan that you can apply it to. The only reason we're going at Trump is because basically Trump is in power at the minute. So, he's the government, and we don't like the government when the government basically acts in ways that don't benefit us or actively actively harm us.
Well, you're absolutely right with the slogans and the jingos. And it's funny you should bring up both those examples, Neil, because I wrote them down. Make America Great Again. What does that really mean? I mean, here you could be in rural America or you can be in urban America. And those two demographics are completely different. What's great to somebody in rural America is very different than what would make America great if you live in a city, right? I mean, it's just different dynamics all over the place. It's almost... the whole thing encompasses almost infinite possibilities based upon who you speak to. And the whole hope and change thing, going back to the Obama administration, hope and change. Well, I have hopes and I like certain change, but that's going to be very different than people in my family or my friends or the guy down the block and so on. So what they do is it's manipulation from the standpoint that they want you to fill in the blanks.
Exactly.
You fill in the blanks. They're not going to tell you what hope and change means or what make America great means. You're going to determine that within your own head, and we're going to let you run with that.
Yeah. In fact, I'll go a step further. Like, there's a very, very good reason that they don't define what it is, because, as you quite rightly say, people have different ideas about it. So two reasons. One, we might get it wrong. And two, we might actually have to live up to our promises, and nobody wants that. So that's the point. But this is entirely the point. This is essentially, again, why with this concept of nationalism or this aggressive nationalism, why they don't define or promote what's good about the country itself. They talk about what's being taken away or invasion, because you can't. Because the second you start talking about their vision for what is perfect to America, a lot of people go, no black people at all. But that's stupid. Like, it reveals behind the curtain. But again, this is the point. It's a lot of it is basically based on just, getting people to respond to any aspect of life on an emotional level, rather than looking rationally at the facts. Feels over reals, to use the internet speak, but that is exactly what it is. You want to appeal to people on an emotional level, on a gut instinct. I like this guy. Why? I just trust him. Right, you do know that, you do know he's got like at least one illegitimate child, and like he's completely like amoral and has never stuck to a single principle in his life. And I can point out these terrible, terrible things he's done. Yeah, but he's got floppy hair, hasn't he? And he was funny on "Have I Got News for You?" And it's oh my god. That again, it's a confidence trick. It's called personality, and this idea that basically. Connecting, right, here's a really strange thing, right, okay, that you'll notice in a lot of sort of these people like Farage, Johnson, Trump, etc., 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 is that they both represent an incredibly powerful and successful businessman and the chap that you could go to the pub with and just, have a beer with. And what's bizarre is that can't possibly be true. Like, what's even further bizarre is that's one of the aspects of encroaching fascism. But let's not get sidelined with that.
Okay, well, let me ask this then. People will say to me, we talk about the music industry, they'll say, how can it possibly be bad? Because I love my music. It makes me happy. I come home from a hard day of work. I sit down, I have a beer or a glass of wine. I put my music on. So I don't know what you're talking about when you're saying that the music industry can actually be manipulative. How do we address that?
It's not the it's not the music, it's the music industry. You just pointed out what you're saying there. It's the actual industry of it is the problem. Music isn't the problem. I mean, there's certain lyrics I probably wouldn't want my children to hear, but and I definitely wouldn't want to see Miley Cyrus in front of my child, but I wouldn't want to see Lady Gaga doing a mock stage ritual on the stage. I think that's horrific. But the music itself is not necessarily the problem unless you get into this Hertz thing where there's the Hertz changed at one point and that's meant to vibrate on a different level, but that's a meta as a sort of a different sort of thing that we're talking about. It's the industry. It's what you're taking at this point. In Gareth Icke talks in the film, it's David Icke's son. Gareth Icke was in the music industry. He was offered £200,000 marketing deal, and he was offered this if he changed his name. Well, Gareth, being a nice lad, well, I probably can't pronounce my name because he does Ike, he gets all sorts. So he said, well, maybe I can use a band name. And they went, no, we want to you to change your name because we don't want you associated with your dad, and also we want you to also basically say you don't agree with anything your dad talks about. Nothing to do with him. And obviously Gareth turned around and said that, no, clearly that's not going to happen. So now Gareth tours up and down the country and he's working 3 jobs to pay his rent and look after his little girl that he's had last year. And because he couldn't go in the industry, the guy's an incredibly talented singer, incredibly talented songwriter. They were offering him the deal. They were offering him stardom. He's a good looking lad. He's got everything there that you'd want in a pop star. I mean, if you're going to give James Blunt a recording contract, you'd give this guy a recording contract. Quite like James Blunt, actually. But he's part of the military, so he's probably a little bit mind controlled there. But the fact is, the industry is messed up. The industry is incredibly messed up. And that goes way back to Neil knows a hell of a lot about Charles Manson, and that connects to the Beach Boys and the music industry. He knows far more about that than I ever will. But it goes back a long, long time to the Beatles being part of the Tavistock, apparently in dispute and being a Tavistock, whether that's true or not. Again, Neil's going to know more about that than I will. But the music industry, you only have to look at someone like Michael Jackson and his release of was it 1997 Blood on the Dance Floor album. The front cover shows him dancing on a Masonic flooring with the Twin Towers going down in the background. 1997. I mean, Michael Jackson was a child star, clearly abused. There's clearly signs of mind control going on there because he was obsessed with Peter Pan, and we all know if you looked into mind control, Wizard of Oz, Peter Pan, Alice Wonderland, these are all signs of someone who's been through trauma-based mind control.
Well, and a lot of information came out about his father, right?
A lot of information came out of his father. And I think his father took a lot of the slack I think he was an abusive father, but I think there's handlers in that industry that abused the Jacksons far more. And if you look at Bryce Taylor's Transformation of America, I believe, her book, I think it's her or that's Cafe O'Brien, not Bryce Taylor, I get the two mixed up. One of the two of those ladies talks about her seeing the Jacksons being sexually abused as young men before they went on either the Ed Sullivan Show or one of these shows. not by Ed Sullivan, by the way, but before they went on these shows. And these kids are clearly abused. You've got the Disney Club. These kids go in there, the Justin Timberlakes of the world, Britney Spears of the world. These kids have mental breakdowns at 28 because that's what seems to happen from mind control, trauma-based mind control victims. It seems to come back at a certain age, around about 28 to 30. It seems to come back. These things start to come through. They realise why they're having troubles and these problems. This isn't here. This is a lot of research into the background of this. It's not just me saying, so go out and do your own research. But the music industry has facilitated many, many different things. I mean, a lot of these people, I have the theory that a lot of these artists go around the world on these private jets because there's probably things in that private jet holding department, drugs, more likely, weapons, that they're basically trafficking around the world. Because you're not going to check a private jet. So what better place is to stick it in some pop star's private jet? Of course you're going to do. That would make sense to do that, wouldn't it? It might even be in the bloody walls of the plane. So the fact is that when you see something happening, there's probably something else happening also. I know. So the music, you get a lot in lyrics. You get a hell of a lot in the music videos. I mean, that Masonic Florins in so many music videos, it's unbelievable. And now they're just blatantly just doing satanic stuff. And to the point, and I've done this very well over a slow amount of time, that the word Illuminati has become comedic. The actual doing these things has become fashionable because of Jay-Z doing the diamond shape in front of his eye. So they've taken it. They've made it mockery. So even if you point them out, they go, well, that's just them doing this.
It has become pop culture.
It's become pop culture. So now the power has gone from it. So now it's just acceptable that they're having a laugh. And that's the power of these things when you don't realize what's going on. So the music industry has so many different... I mean, take it with Brian Harvey. Brian Harvey is connected to the Craze. And the Craze, I don't know if you know who the Craze are, but the Craze were a big sort of, was it 1970s, late 60s London gangsters. They were run the East End of London pretty much. They're connected to Lord Booby and they're connected to Cliff Richard and all these sort of people. They were connected to Barbara Windsor. They were connected to a lot of famous people, these Craze. And a lot of child sexual abuse was going on around there as well. So there's a lot of this stuff going on. The E17 were part of that as well. So E17 were a later addition to the East End of London music scene. They're still hanging around these people, around Brian to this day, to keep an eye on what he's doing. And that goes far deeper. We haven't got time to go into that today, but I know a lot about all that situation. So the music industry is like Hollywood, is a place to get young people to do things that they shouldn't be doing, and while they're very vulnerable for all sorts of reasons. It could be the symbolism of the music, it could be the song lyrics, it could be the songs itself, but most likely it's usually to abuse the children when they're very young, put out messages that are way too adult for young kids to follow, and also there's big business going on behind there where this money laundering goes through on a mass scale. That's my take on it. From looking into it, you've only got to look at someone like Gareth, his little bit of interest in it. And he had a meeting with Max Clifford. Max Clifford was our version of Jeffrey Epstein a little bit, in the sense of he was killed in prison. And they say he had a heart attack. I'm not buying that at all. Max Clifford was about to write a book about Simon Cowell and all of the people that were on his books, and then suddenly has a heart attack in prison.
Max Clifford was a fixer, just to explain it. He's like a celebrity fixer. So like basically, like you want publicity, he'll create a scenario that gets you publicity, or you want something kept out of the papers, he'll engineer it so it's kept out of the papers, basically.
Well, Richard, if you want to come back at some point, and Neil yourself also, and we could talk about the music industry in more detail, because this is something that I spend a lot of time on. I'm also wondering if Gareth would be open to coming on a show to talk about his experience. I don't know whether he is or he won't be.
He's pretty good. He does his own podcast called the Non-Binary Elephant Podcast, so I'm sure he would. Yeah, he's quite open to speaking about these things. He's a lovely guy.
Because I would like to speak to more people who were in the music industry or were offered opportunities in the music industry, and to tell their stories about what really goes on as far as at least the initial setup to get you into the system, right? I know people who are in the industry, but they won't talk. They will talk to me privately, but they will not come on the show to talk because of the repercussions, right? In other words, the repercussions being that their career will be tanked.
Yes, of course. I mean, you only got to look at Ed Sheeran and everybody. I live in the same city that Ed Sheeran was supposedly was homeless in. He was never homeless.
His father was very well connected, right?
He was. His father was the curator for the royal family.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's very well connected. Yeah.
Okay.
But that's the point, though. Basically, like a lot of these people that you see that are supposedly like organic or whatever, and it's just it's a marketing ploy. It's a real sort of trick. Now, the other point is that I don't think we touched on this in the film, but this is an interesting point. Is that the music industry will con you and it will leave you broke. Because the people that I know that have been in the industry, even people who are very successful bands. So I've got a friend that is owed like tens of thousands of pounds. He practically invented industrial music. This guy, he's a bit of a genius, and he's owed like tens of thousands of pounds by his record company, and they basically turn around to him and says, "Well, we don't think you've got the money to sue us, so we're going to keep it." And that's because he actually made money. A lot of the time, people don't realise that a record contract, I've got a £1 million record contract, that's a loan. That's a loan that they expect you to pay back. And out of that loan, you have to pay for everything that is the project that is you. Every phone call, every bit of food, every person that works on your music, every person that carries your bags, everything. You're paying for every single thing out of that money. Courtney Love did a very, very good. I mean, I know she's a terrible, terrible person, but she did a fabulous article in Rolling Stone a few years ago that explained if you sell 1 million albums, you'll probably come out of it about $10,000 in the red, which means that you have to go on a second tour. And by the end of the second album, if you've sold 1 million copies of that, you'll come out with something like $1 million split between the entire band before tax and before everything's recouped. And the record company will make £9 million off of it, or something like that. But it's just an incredibly detailed breakdown and expose of how corrupt and how just fake it all is. There is one aspect of it, though. Although, as we say, never stop listening to your music. Your music, that's the point. It's there. It's for fun, and it's great. But there is a mechanical aspect to mind control and hypnosis via music, which basically, if you're listening to music, it takes up a tiny amount of your concentration span. It can alter your perception of time. It can alter your perception. I bet people that go to the gym, for example, they've got a sort of go hard song or whatever that it psychs you up. That's why boxers come out to music to psych themselves up. That's why people sing sea shanties, or why slaves beat to a drum, because music can sort of spur you on. But in the same way, that's why you never hear dial tones when you phone up call centres. It's always music, because it tricks you into thinking that you've been waiting for a shorter period of time than you actually have, and you're more likely to stay on the phone. Same thing with lifts, and that's why Muzak is there, is to make that ride seem slightly more pleasurable. But this can be used in, say, supermarkets or evangelical churches. Supermarkets basically is there just because there's so much going on, like, there's red stars and all this and different colours and blah, 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 blah. And it's all there to sort of like bamboozle you, so that when you walk past, you go, ooh, trifle, brilliant, and just put it in your trolley without even thinking. And then you realise that you've come home with yet another trifle, and that's all that's in your fridge. But say in an evangelical church, say someone like Benny Hinn is particularly good at this. They will stand you up and they'll have you praising, which, there's a legitimate reason for that. But actually what it's doing is it's tiring you out. You're in a stress position. Like, you're not only stood, but you're raising your arms as well. There's music constantly going, which is filling your, he's there to obviously to give atmosphere. You've got the choir singing and stuff like that and backing up what he's saying. But what it's doing is it's filling up that finite bandwidth of your brain. And then essentially you're repeating mantras, and you're repeating different, say, verses or responding, call and response. So it's almost like a sort of concert. and you get involved in it. And then before you know it, you become one of the crowd, because what tends to happen in crowds is that people, there's a phenomenon called de-individuation, which means that basically people take comfort in being in a large crowd. They'll give themselves over psychologically to it. And this is how people get swept up in riots, say after a hockey game, because, oh, well, he was doing it, everyone was doing it, I'll just do it. But what happens is that basically, again, it reduces your reasoning capacity. And how this would work in the evangelical church setting is that they bombard you, you're tired, and then every 5 minutes the plate comes by. And not only are you tired and confused and you want to sort of give because, you know, they're selling it to you, but you've also got the peer pressure of the person next to you who's just given, he's given $10. Good God, I've got to give $10. Like, oh, no, that dude gave $20. I've got to give $20 next time. And so all of these tiny things. But this is entirely the point. Most people wouldn't think, they wouldn't think that these are a dozen little mechanisms that are all designed to make you weary so that you don't mind giving money. They would think that, wow, what a lot of effort has gone into making the spectacle of this particular church. And that hopefully is what this sort of film will do, is basically get people to look at the component pieces rather than the sort of the broader picture, because the broader picture very often isn't quite accurate.
Right. There's a reason why they do what they do. And if you could break down those components, then you can stop being awestruck by the dog and pony show and understand why it is that they've set the environment that way. Right. It's to lure you in. It's to manipulate you. It's to condition you. I do want to say one thing. We're talking about money in the music industry, and a lot of folks maybe don't know this, but the music industry, another way that they've hurt artists is they've gotten away from albums or CDs, and everything's gone to streaming, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I have my songs are out there. I've got 2 albums, and but it's a streaming business. So for those out there that think you're making $1 million, or these artists are making a lot of money off of streams, for me, I calculated it out. It's about 1 penny.
Yeah.
For every 4 streams. So think about that. Think about how many times a song has to be streamed in order for you to make any semblance of a meaningful amount of money.
There's 2 points about that, right? You know, what's really sort of galling as well is that all this concept of organic bands from the internet. Oh, we found them on MySpace. Oh, we found them on this. It's like, oh, come on. This is the new arena of A&Rs. The best example of that is Little Pump, who basically apparently just exploded out of nowhere because of his wacky Instagram. And then you discover that actually now he signed a deal with this promotion company. Now, it would appear that this promotion company hasn't actually really got any other artists that have done particularly well. But the point is that they're a social media marketing group, and they will push and create your profile and expand it. But as you say, they're not actually earning a huge amount of money from a lot of this. Now, here's something that I think, this is just my own personal gripe, but I think that this is going to kill music festivals. And I'll tell you for why, right? Okay. If you look at who's on all the metal festivals this year in sort of Europe, it's Judas Priest, and I think Merciful Fate are doing it next year, and Ozzy was playing, and Def Leppard were playing, and the Scorpions and people like this. And it's like, good God, is it 1982 again? Have I somehow like woke up? And I'll tell you why they're doing this. It's because there's no other big bands. And why is there no other big bands? Because people don't listen to albums anymore. People listen to songs and they stream songs. So they don't tend to get that sort of growth of a band. As far as I can see, there's a distinct lack of mid-tier bands. And another point is that basically because concerts are so expensive now, so you can either go and see someone that you've never heard of in a pub down the road, right? Okay. Or you can save up $50 and go and see the Killers at the Arena. Okay, which is a bit more than you really want to spend, but hell, you might as well treat yourself, even though they're a bit done now, etc. Do you know what I mean? But where's those bands moving into that, and how are they going to do it? Because if you're not streaming their albums, if you're just streaming this song and this song and this song, you're never going to get that appreciation of an act in the same way. Like, I think the days of, like, you know, whacking on your headphones and looking at the gatefold, they're definitely gone. But yeah, there is something really, really sort of transient about the nature of streaming. I mean, I've been looking at sort of like some hip hop artists as well that are doing concerts at clubs that they're like 15 minutes long. And it's like, what a complete total waste of everybody's time. And the reason it's 15 minutes long is because they've only got 4 or 5 tracks. And like, I even saw a Little Pump song where he did the same song 3 bloody times because he ran out of material. And it's, yeah, I think that's troubling. But again, it's almost like the mobile phones and the laptops. It's something that basically convenience. And actually, really, it's ruining it for everybody.
It is. And it's you know, for folks that are musicians and trying to get into the business, or even being an independent musician, an indie artist, it's a very, very difficult industry to break into and to make any money. They lead you to believe that, you know, stardom is a possibility, but this is what they do with everything, right? It's like telling the inner city children that if you don't go to school but you play basketball, you could be the next Michael Jordan, right? So they give them this false premise, this false objective, which is not attainable, right? It's not reality, but they'll have them chase ghosts with the thinking that they can make $1 million someday. So it's really sad in a way. It's the way that people are being led and the gullibility of the masses.
I was just saying, what's really strange about it now as well is how short-lived artists' lives, artists' professional lives are.
Yeah, the shelf life.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, like they go from being the hottest thing on the planet to all of a sudden being done in very, very short space of time. And I'm sure that you've got equivalent shows. I don't know what they're called. Like we've got this horrible, horrible thing, which again is part of this concept of aspirational lifestyles and like promoting thing. It's called Love Island. Basically, as far as I can see, it's a lot of attractive people going on there and basically sort of having it off with each other. And that's as far as I can tell what happens in it. But it creates these people very, very quickly and then drops them because you've got the next season. Like we had a whole raft of, you know, you have The Voice and what was the crap before The Voice? But, you know, essentially all of these people like were given £1 million record contracts. Where are all of them now? Like literally all of them. Like, and again, I'm going off on a bit of a tangent. I heard something, you know those programs that they have where your neighbours all get together and they do up your house and they do you a solid and it's you away on holiday. I read the majority, if not all of those houses, immediately the families had to move because all of a sudden what you've done is you've increased the property. So you've upped their mortgage payments. The reason those houses were going into sort of like disrepair is because they can't afford it anyway. And then essentially you've added a huge amount of extra expenditure on top of that. And these people couldn't afford it. It was the same with Pimp My Ride. The thing that I never realized is they didn't fix the cars up. They just put loads and loads of weight on top of them. So you turn up with your sort of, you know, you clapped out old like Fiat or whatever, and you go, oh, yeah, this is knackered. Please pimp my ride exhibit. And he turns up and goes, I've added half a ton of electronics onto that. So your insurance premium's gone through the roof and you'll never get up a hill. See ya. And that's really what happened. So again, in all of the cases, it's like, well, thanks, actually, you've just destroyed my car. And that was the other point was that I've heard that 9 out of 10 of the things that they put on there, like if they put a computer system in it, it's like it didn't actually work. It was all just for show for the cameras and stuff like that. So like,
I think it's a good point there, Neil, is that you could apply that across the board. It doesn't actually work. It's all just for show, for cameras. In politics, in banking, in everything, it's all just for show. It doesn't function the way. It is all an illusion. Everything. I can't think of one of the topics that we covered, or I can't think of a topic that I could actually think of and went into it and thought, actually, that's pretty much right. Yeah.
Very straightforward, isn't it? It's entirely how they explain it in the mainstream. There's always just something else that's just like, oh, hang on, this isn't quite the way that it's been explained, basically. So, it's a tricky old world, isn't it, man?
Well, that's why Wizard of Oz was such a powerful film for many other reasons, but that film just says it. As blatant as you can say is that there's someone behind, or a bunch of people behind the curtain pulling on the strings, not knowing what they're doing half the time, and panicking. And they're panicking for one reason is that we're going to find out that they're panicking. And that's the big reason. That's the big thing, and the illusion of choice is the biggest illusion. The illusion that how can I choose? If you're choosing between Pepsi and Cola, someone's provided you with those two choices. They're not. That's not a choice across the board. That's a illusion of choice, and that's kind of best of two bad worlds, really. And is what choice is that?
Did you notice they've started the Pepsi Challenge again? I don't know whether it started in America again, but yeah, they've started a new advertising campaign of doing the Pepsi Challenge, which now, here's an interesting thing again for people that think that they couldn't be coerced or they couldn't be hypnotized. The Pepsi Challenge, just to explain it, what they do is they supposedly put Coca-Cola in one cup and Pepsi in another cup, and you drink it. And what's really mysterious about when you do these Pepsi challenges is you always seem to choose Pepsi. It's bizarre. It's almost as if it was some sort of confidence trick. Anyway, in the 90s, I forget exactly where it was. I think it might be Harvard, but some very learned doctor in some very sort of very sort of highly thought of institution wanted to test this and see if there was any actual difference, because, you know, like anything, people become cult-like adherents to it. So, I love this brand is me, which is, you know, it is in its essence cult-like behavior, because what do cults do? Cults tell you exactly how the world is, where you fit into it, and what's going to happen. So it's and it provides with like-minded people who surround you. So they're very, very psychologically comforting. And that is the way that they sell products to you and attach meaning to a product for you. Anyway, so they wanted to check to see which was better, Coca-Cola or Pepsi. And they got a huge amount of people who were the avid fans on both sides. And it was discovered that in double-blind tests, no one could tell the difference. Not a single person could tell the difference. But what was really strange was that when this liquid was presented to them in a Coca-Cola cup or can, or with something to do with the marketing asset, they recorded it as tasting better. Now, they tried the same thing with Pepsi, and that didn't work. So what does that mean? Well, that meant that the expectation from Coca-Cola's marketing physiologically changed the function in their brain, so they thought they were getting a better product. And so they wanted to take this further. So they put people into a sort of closed-off space, and they actually fed them water. Didn't change the liquid at all, and they flashed up different imagery: Pepsi imagery, different neutral imagery, Coca-Cola imagery. When the Coca-Cola images flashed up, not only did they report having a more pleasurable experience, but brain scans showed that the parts of the brain that experienced pleasure were firing up more than if the Coca-Cola advertising had not been done, which again proved the power of the marketing, the expectation that Coca-Cola is a superior product and will give you this fabulous, fabulous experience was so powerful that it physiologically changed the brain response of the applicants. So, you know when they say like the first bite that you take is actually with your eyes, that applies to drinks too, apparently.
Let's just shift for a moment here to movies and TV. I want to get this in before we wrap up here, because obviously it's a very, very key component to the mind control and the conditioning of the masses. So, and I'm going to lump them together, movies and TV. What do they do in movies and television that you guys believe most people are unaware of? As far as, conditioning and employing the mind control?
Well, I think with movies and TV, people don't understand the Hollywood narrative. There is literally, you can time it by your clock, that there is a complicated action within 20 minutes. Something will happen to change the world of this person. There's a formula, I think is the word I'm looking for. There's a formula to this, and there's a formula to TV, because they know how to suck you in. So it is a mind control manipulation technique. I mean, there's the actual product they're putting out, and then there's the industry. They're two different kind of things. I mean, they're both. The industry is a hard place to work in. The products that they're putting out are catered towards pushing you, and they're just big sales pitches. If you look at the news, the news is just a big sales pitch. It's not anything more than that. The mainstream news, anyway. I mean, it's ridiculous, and it's so bad now that TV news is unwatchable for anyone who's understands the slightest bit about TV production. That these people aren't, and they call them journalists, which is even fun. They're presenters. They're presenters. They're calling presenters journalists. So they're not news journalists. They're presenters. They're reading off an auto cue. It's like calling David Attenborough a journalist. He's a presenter. He does voiceovers for nature programs. Doesn't know anything about nature. He just talks. He just reads the script, and that's what's happening. So, and then they all read scripts, and these people are reading scripts. They're allowed in that industry. They're doing the job. They don't do that job, they'll get shut out. That's why they're there, because they are the malleable people. They are people that are willing to go along with it for that wage to say what they're supposed to say. I remember watching David Icke on this morning as a thing here, and he was having a go out by we've got a lady called Holly Woolabooby. I think it wasn't her, it was before her, but Philip Schofield, and they hadn't had a clue what his books were about. They'd never read his books. They hadn't even bothered. And then and he even asked one of the guys on another show, have you read? He said, I think conspiracy theories are a load of old nonsense. And he said, have you read one of my books? He goes, no, I haven't read one of your books. And he went, well, how do you know it's nonsense? How do you know my book's are nonsense? You haven't read it. And that's what you're dealing with in the TV industry when it comes to news. Films as a whole other kettle of fish. You've got all of these. You've got the industry again, which is built around the Hollywood industry, and then you've got the TV, then you've got the British film industry, and then you've got the independent film British industry that doesn't have any money at all, and you're all scraping by trying to make low-budget films and putting them out on Amazon. They're all different types of things, but they're all art manipulation. I think it comes back down to intent. You know the BBC is going to feed you some sort of propaganda. You know ITV in England's going to do the same thing. You know NBC, CBS, Fox. All of these places are just putting out a message, an agenda that they're supposed to be putting out, but people still watch them. And I find that fascinating in a time where people, I thought, were quite aware. And I don't know if you guys have this either, but I find it really frustrating. And also I forget that people are that unaware that these things are manipulating them, because it seems so obvious now, but they seem to be.
Is there any neutral news? Like, no, by politically, I mean, because like, it's just literally just struck me how like politically divided the media is. Like, I just wonder, is there actually a neutral news, one that is not associated with one of the political parties? Probably not. I mean, like it is, yeah, very, very, very strange. Like, but this is the thing. That's the subtle echo chamber that it actually creates as well. I mean, aside from the fact that, you know, they're not going to touch on certain things, they're going to be inaccurate about other things, they're playing to an audience. Now, there's a corporate point level to that. There is the sort of, you know, shareholder type, etc., 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 etc. But then again, this is where it starts to sort of get really, really sort of shifty and shady, because it's like, well, okay, fine, but what is the ideology of your corporate shareholders and such like that? You know, and that's something that people just don't think about. Like, you know, what is what's the worldview really behind these organisations? What's really strange about films, for example, is that basically there is a genre of gritty realism, you know, which sort of points out that, yeah, I mean, we know that these films and stuff like that, but they present a hyper-realistic understanding of the film. I mean, again, a really sort of basic way of explaining how films distort reality is someone gets shot with a silencer and you hear and the bloke goes, "Ugh." Like, if you've ever watched people being shot, if you've ever like seen a silencer being shot, they don't make things silent. In some cases they actually make it louder. It's bizarrely, like, it's a suppressor. It's supposed to hide the muscle flash, as far as my understanding goes, but it certainly doesn't make it assassin quiet. And people don't get propelled. People don't, when explosions happen, you don't get thrown through the air. There's so many physicality things that have become tropes, for example. There's loads of these. Like, what do you do when you're making a sword? Like, you bang it out so it's like it's red hot, and then what do? You plunge it in a bucket of water, right? I wouldn't. Do you know what happens when you put red hot metal into icy water? It shatters and sends like red hot projectiles all over the place. It's just that looks good for films. But again, these are concepts. Again, this is subtle hypnosis and stuff like that. Another one is this idea of Japanese swords folded 200 times for the purest blade. You don't fold metal like that. It's not how it works. The only metal that you'd even consider folding like dozens of times is pig iron to try and get imperfections out of it. The more you fold something, the weaker it actually gets after a point. So again, there's all these tropes. But the thing is that tropes become truisms. And again, one of the things is basically like a soap opera. Janine comes downstairs and like you can tell, oh, something's not right. And she pours herself a large vodka and bangs it back. Oh, we can tell by the signs that signifies that something's happened to Janine. Janine's not happy, right? But the flip side of that is it certainly reinforces that alcohol is perfectly normal and natural, nay, the actually appropriate way to deal with trauma. And again, like that, I don't wish to sound hysterical. I'm giving a very glib example. I'm not like saying, no, stop having a drink. But this is just how these things feed in. And they just give you subtle messages, right? Very, very, underhandedly. One way of explaining it is that joke on The Simpsons where the guy is wearing a white coat and he goes, so let's take this and this and this and then all of these. Oh, thank you, doctor. Oh, I'm not a doctor. And he just walks off. But it's the assumption of with a, white coat, stethoscope or whatever, it implies a level of authority. And it's that things that we really want sort of people to, that's what happens with film and television is it tends to reinforce it. I mean, obviously, you've got lots of different things. You've got politics. Here's an interesting one. Oh, this is going to be controversial. But basically, a lot of people will tell you that the BBC is massively, massively anti-Brexit. And it's like, well, is it? If you look at the actual statistics, they've had Nigel Farage on hundreds and hundreds of times. They've actually had more pro-Brexit stuff than anti-Brexit stuff. A lot more, actually. And there's an idea that the BBC is quite left-wing, and it's like I can see where people get that idea because there's a lot of connections to things like environmental issues and diversity. But to me, again, that's a bit these woke advertising, isn't it? It's basically this like, come on, like you're just trying to appeal to people. Actually, if you look at the politics of the BBC, they've always been very, very conservative, very right wing. It's the British establishment, for Christ's sake. Of course they are. Like, there's not a lot of people at the top of the British establishment that go, yes, isn't it time we gave something back to the proletariat? I mean, we've got it pretty good here. Like, we just don't tend to have that attitude. And again, but this is something that we actually touch on in the film. But I think we mentioned this earlier. They don't. I think a lot of people actually they convince themselves that their behaviour is appropriate because they're benevolent benefactors. Like as I said before, they don't feel that people are capable of making sensible decisions. And and you know what's really horrible about those? That occasionally they'll do something. Like there's this thing called universal credit in England, which is basically rather than getting like weekly payments or bi-weekly payments for your welfare things, they'll give you all in one lump sum. And what happens when that happens? Because people aren't used to dealing with enormous amounts of money, they spend it, or like they run out very, very quickly.
It's like gone in a week. Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult to budget, like because you assume that you've got lots and lots and lots and stuff like that. But you can use that by going, see, we can't give these people this because they'll just fritter it away and yeah, and it's that's horrific. Is basically the manipulation against different people. Like it used to be very, very poor people in this country or people on welfare. Now it's gone back to immigrants and foreigners and stuff like that. And it's about why. What is it that I will tell you what it is that makes all of those groups attractive prospects for a sort of like a hate campaign is because you know just enough about them to hate them. You don't know quite enough about them, so they're a little bit mysterious, and mysterious things are always scary. But what's really ideal is that basically these people, despite the fact that you will convince yourself that they're the be-all and end-all and scary and have all this power, don't have a platform to respond, which makes you feel terribly superior. And again, it's that understanding of that mechanism of, I can make you feel good. I can do this by basically that, don't look at the man behind the curtain. Look at the person over here. He's the cause of all your woes. And it's very often not the case.
Let me ask, before we wrap up here, this has been a great conversation, guys. Really, we have to reconvene at some point and continue, because there's a lot of ground to cover here. But before we head out, there's two questions I want to ask each of you, Neil and Richard, and you guys can decide, flip a coin, who wants to go first. But we talked about all this, and some of the audience are going to be thinking, well, okay, but what is the purpose of all this? What is the agenda that is in place? I mean, there's got to be rhyme and reason as to why all of this manipulation, this conditioning, and this mass trance is put out there. And so that's question number one. And question number two would be, what do you personally do to maintain your sanity in this very, very crazy world?
Now, with me, it's always been this globalist centralization of power. I do think that's a genuine thing. I don't think it's as cut and dry as Neil says in the documentary, as too bad people, good people. I think there's a lot of egotistical people having a go at each other. I think it's that, but I do think there's a class. It's an elitist class, banking usually. It doesn't take a genius to figure out, if someone's got money, they have hold over you because you need money. So there is a class there that have a lot of money that can pay people to do certain things. I do think that there is an agenda for global centralization of power. And that's all it is. They just want more power and more control. So there is a certain amount of people in the world, a small percentage of people in the world that are controlling everything, but not in a not cohesive way. These people, I agree with Neil when he says that these people are lunatics, and you need to accept that they're going to act like lunatics. So they're obviously going to do maniacal things. They're going to do things that really are awful, but they're also going to do awful things to each other as well. And I think that's probably what we're seeing with this Epstein thing and the Trump thing and all these things. They'll just as much screw each other over as they'll screw anyone else over. But I do think there is an overall agenda that they don't touch. And that's as much as I think I'm ever going to know. I think that the reason why we all have a go at each other, and I think the biggest thing to learn is that there is an us and them. But it's not us and them as in white supremacy, black, white. It doesn't really matter. It clearly doesn't matter. But there is an elite class that want to stay that way, and they will do anything to stay that way. And the biggest, I think, problem there is that we are looking to them as adults, as you do as children. You look to mummy and daddy to tell you about the world. So they do something, you react. The only way we're ever going to get around that is if we don't react, we just do. And forget what they're doing, because they are always going to be a step ahead of the game. As long as we're reacting, we're always a step behind, because we're being manipulated, because they're putting the choice of meal out on the plate, on the table. So that is for that one. To stay sane, I find dark humor in it all. I find it really funny, and I have to find it really funny. Not funny as in like it's silly. I find it all so mad and bizarre and weird that I find it really darkly funny, and that kind of helps me a lot, that this world is mental. It's absolutely mental, and the fact is I'm going to be dead within 40 years, more than likely anyway. So any good fun to be able to do a podcast like this or make a film with Neil and talk about these things, and I feel very grateful to have a fiance and physical health, and to be able to even think about these things and cognitively function in this way and have the time to chat about these things. So I kind of look at all the benefits of it all and just think, well, at least I know these things. I mean, I'm literally going to be working hopefully with David Icke in the next couple of months. And that for me is a massive thing. Like, he's always been someone I've always looked up to. Don't believe, it's not that I believe everything's written. It's the fact that he's always stood by his word and gone, this is what I believe. There you go. Like it or lump it. And I admire that. I admire that ability. Neil does the same in his books. Here's my research. If you don't like it, it's fine. It's okay. We don't have to all be right. We can have disagreements, but it doesn't have to be personal. And your ego isn't based in I'm right, you're wrong. It's just an opinion. It's just research. I don't take it all that seriously, because I could wake up one day and find out none of it, anything that I've spoken about in the past is true. And I'll still be a nice person. And that's all really that matters. I'm a nice person and I know my intentions are good. So I suppose that's the way I keep saying is I know my intentions are to make the world a bit better of a place, and I'm trying to do the right thing. And that's all really I can do. Anyway.
It's interesting. I wanted to mention, you mentioned David Icke, and David was one of my first podcasts going back over 5 years ago. Nobody knew anything about me. I just cranked up these podcasts, and somebody I knew had his email. So I took a shot, and within a few days, maybe 5 days, I got a response back. And David said, sure, I'll come on your podcast, which was a huge boost. And it says a lot about David, because he could have easily said, I don't know who this guy is. I'm not going to waste my time, right? And he came on, and that was over 5 years ago. So good luck with the work that you're going to be doing with David, Richard. That's got to be very exciting.
Yeah, it really is. Really is for me. I admire the man. I admire what he's done. I know he's been a writer about incredible things, but I just admire the fact that he's always stood up for what he believed in, and it's very hard to do that in a world where you're constantly being bullied, controlled, and put in a box and told you're this and told you're that. It's an example that I would like my children to follow, and it's an example that I tried to follow. Is that you might think I'm stupid, but I know I'm a nice person. But Neil's work has been incredible. And I'm not just saying it because Neil's there, but Neil's work is I admire Neil's work because it's so well detailed, and I always admire something I can't do. And there's no way I could write a book like the way Neil does, because it's just the amount of research and detail in it. It's far beyond what I could do in that way.
Neil and I did a show on Charles Manson when you wrote the book, Neil.
Oh, yeah.
I have no idea where you found the time to research
It did take
and
me
to write that book. It's absolutely amazing. And that show has done very well, by the way. I think it has over 20,000 views.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, well, thank you very much, both of you. But yeah, I mean, it didn't take. I didn't do it in an afternoon. It took me many years. Like so, yeah. But yeah. So how do I keep sane? Drinking hard drugs mainly. But no, not really. Well, sometimes. I totally agree with what Rich has said. In as much as basically, yeah, the agenda is to maintain status quo. Basically, like there's people at the top echelons of society that don't all get along. Some of them have completely opposing views, and some of them hate each other. Some of them have got very sort of cagey alliances and very odd bedfellows. But essentially, the sort of golden rule is, toss at the top, plebs at the bottom. And that's what they want to sort of continue. The real way that I would stay sane, or would advise other people to do, is just basically trying to think what it is that you actually want to do. Because as Rich says, you're not going to change the world, so you've got to sort of focus on the things that are going to like make you happy. Figure out what it is that you're being stopped from doing, and just go out and do it. Like if you want to get a bit healthier, just start going for walks, like just go to the gym. Like there's ways of achieving things and making yourself happier without spending money and stuff like that. If you want to learn an instrument, learn an instrument. I think that creating stuff is a really great avenue, like either writing or playing music, making films, just doodling or drawing or something like that. Anything, just try and get some. It's really great. Like you can get a really nice sense of accomplishment when you do complete something or create something. And again, if the point isn't necessarily to be brilliant straight away, it's a process. It's keep trying, keep plugging away, and don't listen to anybody who says, "Oh, you're too old." If you want to be a rapper, pick up a microphone and start rapping. I don't care if you're 45. Like give it a whirl. Like you're younger than most of the Wu-Tang Clan are at the minute. So so go have a go. Like that would be it. And the whole point is to overwhelm people. isn't it, really? It's to make people feel that they are completely powerless, and it's easy for people to fall into that trap and to think of it like that. So I think it's very important to break things down into small, manageable pieces in order that you don't get overwhelmed, and set yourself little goals and stuff like that. And as Rich says as well, you've got to have a dark sense of humour about these things, because, you know, if you don't, it will soon eat you up.
I tell folks all the time, pursue the truth, because the more you know about how reality really works, you actually avoid the traps.
Yes, right? Yes, very much so.
You don't step into a lot of the traps, and your life gets exponentially better when you don't get sucked in.
That's just a really good point, Mike. Actually, I mean, just for example, if somebody comes up to you and you know about drop close sales techniques or something like that, right, okay, and you know it's a con. Somebody's got you on the phone, right, okay, and they say, we're going to offer you this for $99. And then you say, oh, I'm not really sure. Hang on a minute. Let me just have a quick word with my manager. Clip off the mic, silence, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, bang. Hey, mate, I've just had a quick chat with my manager, right, okay, and we shouldn't really do this, but we've been looking over your sort of past history, and you've actually accrued what would be called reward points with our company, which means that really you shouldn't do this, but I can fiddle with the paperwork. I can offer you the same product today for just $69.99, which is far below the retail price. You'd be really getting an absolute bargain there. In fact, what I'll do is I'll throw in 30 days money back guarantee, so you can send it back to us if you're not happy with it. You understand that you're never going to send it back, right? Okay. And if they could sell you that at $69.99, they've just lied to you for the last half an hour. Okay. That sales technique becomes far less impressive. And so, as you say, you go, all right, okay, I bet you're going to click off the phone in a second and offer it me for $59.99 with 2 extra programs. Once you know that, you can either go, what's your lowest price, mate? Because that's what I'm taking it. Or you can hang up because you understand that this is a con.
That's right. Well, gentlemen, this has been really, again, a great conversation. It's been fabulous. I really, really enjoyed it. I'm glad that we hooked up. And I wish you well, Richard, with the film, and Neil, because you were a big part of the film. Where is it going to be now? You mentioned on Amazon. Is that where it's going to be released?
It is, yeah. But you can go across now. We've already put a website up. So if you go to Extreme Danger, extremehypnosis.com, and sign up there, there's nothing. It's literally just put your email address in there. And as soon as the film comes out, we'll send you a link to the film. And there's some on there. There's all the podcasts that we've done previously. I hope to put this one on there as well for myself. And also there's a web series on there. It'll give you a taster. There's about 7 episodes on there. It'll give you a taster of what's going to be in some of the chapters. And there's the trailer on there as well. So yeah, if you go to Extreme Danger, extremehypnosis.com, and sign up there, and we will send you the link directly as soon as it comes out, hopefully within the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks, really. We're really looking forward to coming out.
And that concludes another Sage or Quay interview, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as I did. Links to my guests' websites and social media are listed in the description box below. And as always, I would like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog. You can find all my social media and web links by visiting my hub website at sageofquay.com. Also, if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to check out my music and album releases. And remember, live in truth and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone with the next show. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Hey there, girl, come on over here. Don't be shy, there's nothing to fear. I like your style, I like the way that you move. I love your smile, I really dig your groove. Take a trip with me, let your soul be free. Come on, girl, we can change the world. Let's do it now, let's make it real. Hey there, girl, it's a brand new day. Gonna shake things up and do it our way. Spread your wings and come fly with me. You won't look back because love is still free. Take a trip with me. Let your soul be free. Come on. let your soul be free. Come on, girl, we can change the world. Let's do it now, let's make it real. They're playing with our heads so we don't think. Trapped in a lie where eyes don't blink. Angry plastic freaks always in your face. We gotta do something to change this place. Come on, girl, look to the sun. Reach for the sky, we're gonna have some fun. Let's change the world, let's do it now. Hey there, girl, it's a brand new day. Gonna shake things up and do it our way. Spread your wings and come fly with me. We won't look back because love is still free. Make it real. We're gonna change the